Welcome to MenopauseWize, your go-to podcast for all things evidence-based in the menopauseverse. I am Dr. Supreet Patel, an MD gynecologist, a menopause health advocate, a postmenopausal woman, and the founder of MenopauseWize. And I'm so excited to have you join us on this journey. Whether you're a healthcare provider looking to stay on top of the latest evidence-based practices, a woman navigating your own perimenopause or menopause journey, or a partner or family member eager to support a loved one, this series is designed with you in mind. Our mission through MenopauseWize is to close the menopause knowledge gap by bringing you the latest research, expert insights, and practical advice, empowering you to make informed decisions about menopause and perimenopause. Welcome to today's episode of the MenopauseWize podcast, where we will discuss sleeping better during perimenopause and beyond with Dr. Heidi Lescanec. Dr. Lescanec has been a licensed naturopathic doctor for over 20 years with a background in anthropology and the healthy cooking field for over 30 years. Her goal is to empower women in the menopause transition, not only with medicine to transform their physical health, but also with knowledge and tools to make positive, practical changes that enhance their daily lives. She is also working on a book called The Pink Zones, a term she coined to describe the places and conditions which allow women to flourish in midlife and continue to thrive as they age. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Lescanec. We are so happy to have you here to discuss sleep, which is so central to the body and the brain, and so many women don't sleep so well during perimenopause and beyond. So thank you for discussing this today on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Such an important topic.
Yes. So let's start with the very basic question. Why are so many women, or why do so many women struggle with sleep at perimenopause, especially during the transition? And some of them continue to sleep poorly even after the transition, deep into postmenopause.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, women in this time experience sleep disturbances as the second most common symptom after hot flashes. So this is why I think it's a critical topic to discuss. And, women going through perimenopause face many of the same challenges for sleep as others do. So things like stress, anxiety, or irregular schedules. So all these impact all humans at this time. But menopause and the perimenopause transition especially can introduce, several other layers that affect women in this transition time. And so should I just run through a couple of those?
Of course,
a list
please.
of those things?
Yes.
So number one is that early on in the beginning of that perimenopause transition, where some of the changes begin, progesterone is the first hormone to decline. So I know there's a lot of discussion about estrogen and this concept that, estrogen is the hormone we all need, and that's what we're, suffering from being deficient in. But actually progesterone is the first one to go down. And it acts on the GABA receptors in our brain. And its main effect, GABA, is to be inhibitory and calming. And so when progesterone binds to these receptors, it enhances that relaxing, anti-anxiety, and sedative effect, which helps us to reduce stress, calms our mind, and promotes greater, deeper sleep. So if we are declining in our progesterone, if we're, experiencing disturbances in that hormone that we are used to having, then we are going to have disruptions with our relaxation response and challenges with getting that deeper quality of sleep.
Absolutely.
So that's number one. So that's like just on that hormonal level. And then a second one is that we tend to also experience higher amounts of histamine, which is, the chemical that we often think of as being implicated with allergies, with, rashes and seasonal kind of allergy symptoms with, sneezing and runny nose and itchy eyes and those things. So, but histamine is even broader than that. And it's very excitatory histamine. And so beyond just causing like itching and skin reactions, it also can be stressful to have high amounts of histamine. And progesterone deficiency actually exacerbates this. And it reduces our body's ability to regulate histamine. And we tend to also have higher amounts of estrogen in the beginning phases of perimenopause. So we've got high estrogen and low progesterone, and high estrogen actually stimulates more of the mast cell activation, releasing the histamine. So this is like a little bit of a perfect storm where we have this transition in our hormones amounting to elevated levels of excitatory chemicals and cortisol. And so that will disturb our ability to relax and have, again, deep, solid sleeps.
Mm. That's I guess the whole estrogen story, we focus so much on it, and thank you for kind of bringing out the role of progesterone and histamine. I guess we also see some women. Do you see women in your practice who have a lot of allergies, and perhaps that's the histamine is behind all of that?
Yeah, it often comes up and they're very surprised, and just in rashes, like
Mm.
skin reactions. And as we know, skin can also change because every organ in our body, and including our skin, has receptors for these hormones. So when there's a shift and when there's turbulence in what we're used to, this can also affect our skin in that way. But then you add the histamine, kind of elevated amounts of histamine, then that can also make for more itching and more rashes and kind of more reactivity in the body. Yeah.
And what about when we talk about sleep and its importance, could you shed some light on why it's important that we sleep well? Most of us will think, oh, yeah, I can do 24 hours, that is stress, especially those of us who've been through med school training or seen enough emergencies, or right now you're looking at corporate life where, the crazy hours and people are sleeping. I've heard many people comment on how sleep is overrated, or I don't need to sleep. But could you shed some light on the importance of sleep for us, especially during midlife and its implications for future health?
Yeah, I mean, deep, solid, restorative sleep is so critical for brain health. And there's so much evidence and research into that these days with, the implications for dementia and Alzheimer's. And, there's a lot of understanding of how the cleaning system in the brain works at night when we're in deep, solid, restorative sleep. So if we're compromised and we're not getting into that zone of deep, solid sleep, then we are not having that housekeeping, that cleaning mechanism. And so this is one of the things that for future health we know is critical, but even for in the moment, in our present day, when we aren't having those deep, solid sleeps and we're waking up feeling not well rested, there's a few areas in our everyday life that will be compromised. And two important things relate to our metabolic health that are kind of immediate. And one of the things is that deep, solid sleep helps to promote satiation. So it decreases the hormone ghrelin and also cortisol. So this is important for helping us to feel satiated when we're eating healthfully, and also giving us the energy and vitality to go through our day and then make those healthy food choices again, or do the movement that we need for exercise. So we're compromised on so many levels if we're not getting that deep, solid sleep. So then we'll have things like trouble concentrating, focusing, even reactivity, like reaction times are compromised, or we may be overreactive in terms of, having irritability and just less resilience for things. So mood changes, depression also. People who suffer from insomnia have 2 times higher incidences of depression. And there is like a relationship between depression and sleep disturbance. It's bidirectional. So if we have compromised sleep, we're going to have poorer mood. And if we have poor mood, we tend to have compromised sleep. So there's such a deep connection there. And a lot of women in the perimenopause transition also do have some challenges with mood and with low mood. So, yeah.
So, and especially when we're thinking sleep, very often we say, oh, I need better sleep. And that can be so stressful, just knowing that I better sleep better. You're not sleeping, and then the pressure of having to sleep well. So for someone who's struggling with sleep, we often hear the term sleep hygiene. And it's such a beautiful term because we keep thinking of cleanliness around us, but we're not really having the hygiene regarding sleep is getting more and more difficult to deal with, just with the amount of bright lights and the noise around us and the availability of just light in after sunset.
Mhm.
So if you can shed some light and tell us more about sleep hygiene, what does sleep hygiene really mean? If I'm
Mhm.
struggling with sleep, what do I get started with? Get me started on the road to better sleep.
Mhm. I think a lot of people consider sleep hygiene what you do in the half hour or hour before bed. And we could talk about that first, because I think that is a critical first step. But I think even beyond that, sleep hygiene involves in your entire day. So how you live your day can set you up for a better sleep. But let's talk about that half hour or 60 minutes before bed. So it's important to kind of have a preparation, just as we did when, we had kids and we're reading, or, had nephews or nieces or babysat. You would read a bedtime story to like relax your little one and to make them feel safe and at ease and just ready to kind of move into that lovely state of peacefulness. So for ourselves, if we are going through our evenings with bright lights, with caffeine, with kind of stimulating environments or stimulating foods and drinks, then it's going to be very difficult for us to just turn all of that off as soon as we lay down and put our head on the pillow. So we also need that preparation. So it is things like, doing practices that put us into more of that rest and digest or parasympathetic nervous system mode. So things like turning off bright lights, having like kind of calmer environments. For sure, the half hour or even 60 minutes before bed, not having any digital electronics like visual. So the phone, tablet, computer, or TV. It's not just even the blue light. It's just the stimulation from all the movement. So even for people who, read on a device that's got the light, better to read from an actual like book or magazine, or listen to something on like an audio podcast, or there's many apps that are soothing and calming and provide meditations. Of course, meditation in and of itself is very promoting of getting into that zone that helps us to get into deep, solid, restorative sleep. So those are some of the practices I would say that's important in that 30 to 60 minute window for winding down. Dropping your room temperature by a couple degrees is really helpful. We tend to fall into deeper, more restorative sleep when the room is a little bit cooler. So that's one trick. Another way to get the body to do that, if you can't manipulate the temperature in your room by opening a window or changing, the settings, if you don't have a thermostat that alters your room specifically, is having a bath or even a shower before bed. If you're having a shower, great to end it with cool. And then if you're having a bath, it's really nice to add some Epsom salts, which are high in magnesium, so very relaxing to the nervous system. So those are some practices. And if we had more time, we'd talk about the all day kinds of
Well,
setups.
I guess that's such an important thing that you mentioned about it just not being the 30 to 60 minutes before. But yes, it depends on what you started off with
Mm-hmm.
and in the morning, or what was your at what time was your last cup of coffee or tea, right? And if you could go back a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
we won't get into each and every bit of activity, but a few common ones that are in practice in most of our lives, and perhaps that can help us sleep better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think our ability to sleep is really a reflection of the state of our nervous system during the day. So if all day we're doing practices like the stimulants, like coffee, or stimulating activities, we're operating in stress mode. We have like the gas pedal on our nervous system, like press pedal to the metal all day long. If our body hasn't gone through the experience of knowing that it's allowed to go and rest and digest, then it's going to be a lot harder to just turn it on at night after you've had, so many hours of like pressing on the gas. So one of the things that I think about is if we're climbing a staircase all day long, and a stress staircase, we need to take moments to walk down a few steps. Or at the end of the night, it's almost like we're at Everest level. And it's thin air up there. It's going to be really hard. We got to come back down to base camp during the day a little bit. So practices that help us to do that would be, deep belly breathing, taking breaks if you're working on the computer, which is so stimulating, taking breaks to walk and get water. Rehydrating through the day is really important so that you're not just thirsty before bed and going like, oh, I know I need to drink my glasses of water. I'm going to do this all before bed. And caffeine, like not having that even after 10 o'clock for people who are sensitive. I know some people can get away with it kind of like noon, but this is something that a lot of folks are resistant to trialing. But if you are having disturbed sleep and frustrated with this, it's absolutely worth it to work on your caffeine intake and reduce it as early as possible. So have it maybe first thing in the morning and not again through the day. Huge impact on sleep. And alcohol also is a huge element, and especially for women in perimenopause, a lot of the tolerance that we may have had previously, we lose that. And I know we've discussed this before, just how, in fact, that might not be such a bad thing that we don't have that tolerance.
Absolutely. No, that's good. Especially with alcohol, there's a tendency to think, oh, I have a couple of drinks and it puts me off to sleep, and how it's basically a sedative that can put you off to sleep, but it's not really great sleep. So you perhaps don't wake up that fresh, right? Yeah. And alcohol, I guess, is a different topic altogether, and we can have a separate podcast on alcohol.
It is, but one thing I wanted to add to that is just that it does affect your glucose and insulin levels. So for people that are mindful of the metabolic health piece and metabolism and weight management, and also heart health, there's so many things we could talk about, of course, that are impacted by sleep. Just like having poor sleep impacts those areas: metabolic health, blood sugar balance, cardiovascular health, which is so important for the menopause transition. But what alcohol does is it really very much disturbs that, so that our body is kind of in a state of blood sugar imbalance. And so when we have that in the middle of the night, I think a lot of people don't think about this, but what happens is, because there's so much sugar also in alcohol, that what happens is you overproduce insulin, and then your blood sugar drops in the middle of the night, and then your body needs glucose every second to function, even when you're sleeping. All this brain work and this brain cleaning is happening during the night to prevent the dementia that we've talked about. If you are having high amounts of sugar, then all of a sudden drops in sugar, because your body is like, okay, this is too much, then you're going to shoot up cortisol and you're going to have that wakefulness. So a lot of people will tell me, I will wake up through the night, I'm so alert. I'm like, I thought it was 7 a.m. And so alcohol is very compromising for that exact piece, which frustrates so many people. So I think that link is really important to make.
Yeah, and I think also the fight or flight you wake up with when you've had alcohol the previous night. It's this mode of just excessive sympathetic drive, and probably because of the cortisol, and maybe it's got some independent effects as well. But yeah, it feels like a friend, but it's perhaps not.
Yes, this is the catch-22 of we are drawn to things like this when we're going through difficult transitions, things that appear to be relaxing and nourishing, and this is my sweet reward for surviving this day. And then it's compromising you. So like you say, it's sort of like, it's a bit of a friend who's not really your friend.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, going ahead with, we've taken care of all the sleep hygiene. I'm doing all of that. I'm not having any caffeine, no alcohol. I'm winding down well, and I'm doing all of that. I'm still not sleeping well. So two real problems here: A, falling asleep, and B, staying asleep. And both at perimenopause and postmenopause very often are impacted. So could you share some practices or supplements that can help two parts of the problem? A, how do I fall asleep? B, how do I stay asleep? And supplements, and this is assuming someone perhaps doesn't want to take hormone therapy or isn't a candidate for hormone therapy, and if we're talking beyond hormones right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think just in terms of non-supplements, I'll talk about supplements, but as far as exercise, doing exercise earlier in the day, if it's like involves, increasing your heart rate and sweating, great to do in the earlier part of the day, not right before bed, not a few hours before bed, just because that does put you into fight or flight mode. And even though it's a positive stress, we don't want those stress hormones getting in the way of the falling asleep. But the research does show that exercise in the earlier part of the day, not a few hours before bed, is very helpful at relaxing the nervous system, in fact. And then other practices, if we're not able to get that exercise in, things like breath work, which you can do anywhere, any place, doesn't cost anything. That can be really helpful for getting again into that parasympathetic or relaxed nervous system mode. Meditation, again, another very helpful grounding practice at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day. As far as other treatments like massage, like physical medicine, acupuncture can really help to reset that nervous system and get that support from kind of the outside. And then in terms of supplements for falling asleep, melatonin is very helpful for just the onset, if that's the challenge. But in fact, the research has shown, the SWAN study, that most women, the complaints in perimenopause and even postmenopause is more the waking through the night and waking too early. So it's not really the game changer for that at all. Although I think it's very popular and it can be very helpful and it has lots of other roles to play in the body aside from just helping with the onset of sleep. But my favorite thing, of course, and I think everyone needs to do this, is magnesium, and particularly magnesium bisglycinate. It is helpful for just the nervous system, for being in more of a relaxation mode. It has 400 different chemical reactions in the body, magnesium. And one of them is muscle and nervous system relaxation. And then the bisglycinate form is the best, especially if we are having hot flashes and night sweats, which of course is one of the big pieces for why women have challenges in perimenopause for falling asleep, is if they're having that vasomotor instability or other physical symptoms like inflammation, joint pain, physical kind of reasons for why one would have disturbed sleep or restless legs, etc. All these are signs that the nervous system, the musculature could use some relaxation, and magnesium is absolutely the most supportive mineral for that. So magnesium bisglycinate. And then taurine is another amino acid that I find to be super helpful with magnesium. And it's helpful also for the hot flashes and night sweats, which are the most common symptom that women report in perimenopause. Insomnia being number 2, but they're so interrelated, of course. And so that combination is super helpful, magnesium with taurine. And taurine, you really, because you need quite a lot of taurine to have an effect, it's about 3 grams. I do recommend doing a powder for that. And you can also get magnesium as a powder. So that just makes it super easy to combine the two together. And I often find too, when things are in powder form, they might be even more cost effective just because you're not paying for the processing and the packaging of all the capsules. So that's my favorite combination. And helpful for also staying asleep, not necessarily just the nervous system being relaxed to fall asleep, but actually the staying asleep. I wouldn't say it's the strongest of interventions, some women may need more beyond that, but that is absolutely my foundational go-to for the perimenopause transition. And taurine also has another benefit, not just helping with that thermoregulation center, which is what makes for hot flashes and night sweats, but also helps with insulin resistance, which is another, piece that we need to kind of be aware of, can affect us in this transition time. So yeah, really helpful for that. And helps with the GABA receptors, which is the thing that I was speaking of with progesterone. So taurine really helps to support GABA. It also is very helpful for heart palpitations. So I have a number of patients who are on various, hypertension medications and many things, and it's not contraindicated at all, and very helpful actually for heart health. So that's good to know. Yeah, they're very foundational, those two.
What about things like you had mentioned L-theanine sometime in the past, and that also is stimulatory for GABA receptors. And how does that work, and how can one, use it?
Yeah, L-theanine is an amino acid. So like taurine, that's an amino acid. Taurine is found only in animal products. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, that might be a good reason to supplement with some taurine. L-theanine is found in green tea. You would need to drink bucket loads of green tea. And like we were saying, we don't want to do that because of the caffeine that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
Plus you'd be peeing all night long, and we don't want to do that either because that can be a problem already. Nighttime waking. So anyway, so L-theanine really needs to be taken in capsule or liquid form. So it's about 200 to 300 milligrams. And it is really helpful for putting us into the alpha wavelength, which we can even use during the day. It helps us to feel calm yet alert if we're taking it during the day. And if we do it before bed, it actually helps us to get into that zone of deeper, solid, restorative sleep. So I love L-theanine when someone's saying I'm having heightened anxiety, or I'm just in fight or flight. I'm in the sandwich generation, or I'm dealing with teenage kids, or like all the things that are also happening to us at midlife, which could in and of themselves be why we're having insomnia. So L-theanine really to me stands out. If someone's saying my nervous system's really activated, I'm feeling anxious, I'm having trouble with focusing, like that brain fog piece, L-theanine is super helpful for sleep and even during the day.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of L-theanine as well. I've used it many times in the past, and I feel it definitely has some effect. Not necessarily it's not definitely a sedative, but it definitely calms you down to sleeping better, and that's why it's probably okay to use in the day as well. You're talking about, waking up at night to pee. I just thought we'll bring that up just because sometimes that can be the only problem that's keeping you awake, especially late in post-menopause when the genitourinary syndrome of menopause kicks in. And could you spend just a few minutes on the use of low-dose vaginal estrogen, because that's like such a simple solution to the problem. So if you could tell us something more about that.
Absolutely. I think this is such a good point to the fact that sleep is so multifactorial. So if we're having physical disturbances, so if there are other systems that are, not in balance or having disruption, it's going to affect our sleep. So this is why I think we are having so much discussion around this and need to. So yes, topical or vaginal estrogen, usually I use estriol, which is the third kind of estrogen, but there are some other products that are estradiol. Using it topically is not systemic. So it's just applied to the vaginal tissue and is super effective for helping with the tissue to have more resilience and be less, have less friction and more irritation or dryness. But there's another role that it plays is when our estrogen goes down, it actually changes our vaginal microbiome. So it can make us more susceptible to inhospitable bacteria or yeast overgrowth. So this can lead to, of course, vaginal yeast infections, but also, urinary frequency, urgency, and urinary tract infections in and of themselves. So it can be really effective for even like the symptoms, but even kind of like a little deeper at helping with the ecology of the vaginal kind of and bladder area. And so, yes, so that could, if that's tended to, that could definitely decrease the nighttime waking. There is something else. So if someone's not able to access that, which there really are no contraindications for that because it isn't systemic. So it isn't going to increase estrogen into other parts of your body. It's really just that local area, like the vaginal and urinary tract. But if someone can't do that or can't access that or is waiting to, one tip is to put a pinch of sea salt in water that you drink through the day. And it just sort of like opens up the channels to allow you to actually really get hydrated. And I'm telling you, for my male and female patients alike, for some, this is a real game changer for the nighttime waking. There are many herbs that we can use for this as well, but this is one kind of thing you can put in your day that can make a huge difference. And And of course, cutting off the rehydration, an hour or two before bed, so that you're really drinking your water all through the day, as we should be. We shouldn't be guzzling it all at one time anyway. But yeah, so having that cutoff time before bed, just enough to cleanse your palate and take any medicines you take, in the evening, but not so much rehydration closer to bed.
Are there any other supplements that you'd like to tell us about? We did L-theanine, magnesium, and taurine,
Yeah, I
melatonin.
really love ashwagandha is excellent as an herb, specifically for sleep. It's an adrenal adaptogen herb, which means that it helps the body to adapt to stress. And I think of it as a refill to our adrenal bank account, which for many of us, that's been taxed and depleted before perimenopause. So I think a lot of what we deal with in the challenges in perimenopause aren't just the hormone transition, but it's what predates that. Like how well set up were we for the rocky road, and so ashwagandha is wonderful, and it's also a relaxing herb. So it's very helpful with actually to combine it with L-theanine. There is a product out there that is ashwagandha and L-theanine, and that's one of the ones that people tell me they just take repeat, even if there's nothing else that they're continuing with on in life. That's one that people are just finding. I think it's one of the combination supplements for our time, because I think most of us are in that, stress mode during the day. So to have that assistance before bed is wonderful. Yeah.
And what about the use of, we touched upon a little bit on melatonin earlier, and its use for falling asleep. And are there any other concerns around it, or where does it fit in all of this?
Well, I think of melatonin like mainly for that person who's having trouble with falling asleep. So if that's you, if you're having challenges with falling asleep, it could be really effective. I do often find people are taking very high doses, and it's not necessary to take high doses. But sometimes people skip from going to like 0 to going to 10 milligrams just because that's what's available. And often if they're tablets, you could cut it in half and try 5 milligrams, but even better would be 3. And for some people who say they are groggy the next day, even 1. So there are some companies that make sprays or liquids where you could dose it as you see fit. Like you could start with 1, move up to 2, move up to 3. For a lot of women, they definitely don't need 10 milligrams, but it has other roles. Of course, if someone's doing shift work, super helpful for helping with that circadian rhythm, which really does get thrown off as we get older. And
Jet lag.
Jet lag, absolutely. Changing time zones. It also is a very good antioxidant. It helps with the lower esophageal sphincter. So if someone's having reflux or heartburn, it can help with that. It's used a lot in cancer prevention. I mean, there's so many roles for melatonin that go beyond sleep, but just to stick with the sleep, I would say mainly for the falling asleep part.
And I've noticed the doses as well, and I've occasionally used melatonin, especially for jet lag. It's just to kind of get back quickly into the zone that you're traveling to, so that you don't spend too many sleepless nights. And I feel like splitting the tablet and using just a milligram. I've sometimes bought pediatric doses. And I feel like 1 milligram does the job. It puts me off to sleep. One doesn't perhaps need 3, 5, 10 just because it's available, but it's also becoming harder to find smaller doses unless you go through the pediatric aisle in a pharmacy. So that's thanks for bringing that out there. About the use of hormone therapy and sleep, if you can just touch a little bit, because the whole podcast this episode is kind of dedicated to non-hormone therapy use, but if you can say a little bit about the use of hormone therapy and sleep at perimenopause.
I definitely think it can be very helpful. And my first go-to, you might guess, because I started out with that, would be the oral micronized progesterone. And when it comes to estrogen, we prefer the transdermal, like the topical or the patch, for estrogen, because it bypasses the liver. And there is a lot of research about better outcomes, health outcomes with the topical estrogen or the transdermal estrogen versus oral. So when it comes to estrogen, we do not want oral, but when it comes to progesterone, we need the oral if we're wanting to have that beneficial effect on the brain and on helping with sleep. And I find that to be extremely effective. There is a commercially available progesterone that's called Prometrium. I'm talking North America. Yeah. But it can be also compounded, and it can be, you can have a slow release or sustained release added to it. So it's really helpful if someone's having that disturbed waking through the night, even just the commercially available one without the sustained release. But I find it like a next level. When I write a prescription for the slow release, this is a game changer. Mm-hmm. And that's because of the calming effect that it has on the GABA receptors in the brain, which are really anxiety reducing neurotransmitters that we make if we're getting deep, solid restorative sleep. So it's kind of like a catch-22. If we're not getting deep, solid sleep, we're not making our own neurotransmitters. And so this is kind of helping to assist with that. And orally is the only way that progesterone converts to allopregnanolone. That is what works on the GABA receptors in the brain. So a progesterone cream isn't going to do that. It isn't going to have that effect.
Yeah,
and then
that's yes.
And then just number 2 about estrogen, because I do talk a lot about progesterone, but if estrogen, like bioidentical estrogen, like estradiol, is going to be helping with the vasomotor symptoms, like with the hot flashes and the night sweats, then we're addressing one of the root causes of insomnia that's specific to menopausal women. Also, if it's helping with other symptoms like genitourinary syndrome of menopause, as we mentioned, like then that's going to be helpful. I wouldn't say it's the game changer when it comes to the brain itself for sleep. It is actually, though, helpful with neurotransmitters in general, like with helping to make more serotonin. Mm-hmm. So reducing depression, there's actually research on that, estrogen for that purpose. But I would say if we're just needing support specifically for sleep and we aren't having all the other physical symptoms, I'd say more progesterone is going to be very helpful. And then if there are all those other symptoms, estrogen added to that. Progesterone also does help with the vasomotor instability, helps with the hot flashes and night sweats. So if that also is, like, I would start with that and then see if it would be indicated or helpful to add in the estrogen. Mm. Absolutely, they can be super supportive. And just because of all the critical nature of getting that deep, solid sleep, I have no hesitation with bringing those in as supports, and then maybe weaning them off as things improve, and then just seeing how necessary are they, if it was just for the for addressing the symptoms and helping with the sleep.
And I think it's so important to understand that sleep is multifactorial. It's not just dependent on anything that you do or don't do. And very often, in practice, we have women saying, tell me, what is the one thing that I should do to get good sleep? And there is no one thing, right? Like the number of things that you just named in this 30 minutes, the 40 minutes that we've been chatting, it's just there are just so many different things, and each one of us is so different with our exposure to things in the day, and our chemistry, our biochemistry, our hormonal status, and to ask for a single fix is and this, the aim of this podcast was to overcome the number of questions on social media is overwhelming. Give us a supplement for sleep, and it's not that simple. So, but today we have a range of things that you've shared with us, which can evade or make or allow a woman to avoid using a pharmaceutical sedative, which comes with its own set of problems, including dependence. So this has been like great advice. But if there were 3 pieces of advice, just key takeaways for women, or if there's anything else that I've not, if you'd like to share and I've not covered it in your question.
Well, the one thing I would say about sleep medications, because a lot of people ask me when they're seeking, I would like a supplement or an herb, but I don't want to be dependent. And so everyone thinks that if something's going to help them with sleep, they're going to be dependent. And there's no addictive nature to any of the things that I've discussed. If they solve for a problem and then you withdraw them and the problem persists, then the problem persists. But they don't like, their aim is to put themselves out of business. They really are. Because if you are getting deep, solid, restorative sleep, if you've passed, like moved through the transition with all the disruptive times, you will not necessarily need these things because they're supports. Whereas how I think about sleep drugs or the hypnotics, the pharmaceuticals, is that I don't just think, there's evidence that they disrupt your sleep architecture. So they kind of like helicopter you into this beautiful mountaintop where you believe you're getting deep, solid sleep, and you're not going crazy because you're not up through the night to be like looking at the clock saying, I'm not sleeping. So you achieve that. So you're not going stir crazy, but you aren't getting all those important building blocks tended to that we talked about, like all that cleaning the lymphatic system does at night, and all the help with all the hormones and all of those things. They just don't happen when we're not having that proper sleep architecture. So I think about these supports as building that scaffolding. We can't get dependent on them. If we continue needing to take them, it's because we still have we need the supports. We haven't built our own kind of foundations yet, or moved through the transition. So that's one thing I just wanted to add to that.
No, that's wonderful, and I feel like you're right about if we use crutches when we need them, just use them, and perhaps you need them for longer. Some need them for longer. Some need it for lesser duration of time. But the point is, like simple thing like exercise, and you spoke about how exercise is so important with sleep. It can really change the way you sleep. And a lot of people will not correlate it. But if I'm not sleeping well, I'm not waking up the next morning to hit the gym or to walk. And that cycle's just kind of trapped. But if we use the crutches that you have offered here, and get that straightened out, and then perhaps I will start exercising. And that exercise will make me tired and put me off to sleep, besides strengthening my bones and my heart. But
that's exactly, if I could end with anything, that would be it. Exactly what you're saying is that it's the foundation. Sleep is the foundation of everything. So if there is one item on your self-care list, like the number one to move, like edit it and move it up to the top of your notes, sleep is the single most important activity in your day. And if you do wake up well rested, everything else becomes easier. So getting to the gym. Yeah. Getting to the gym, you have more energy from movement if you've had that deep, solid sleep. You will make better nutrition choices because of the way that the ghrelin and the leptin, the hormones that control your appetite and make you feel satiated, those change when you have deep, solid, restorative sleep in your favor, so that you will make more, healthy diet choices, have the broader spectrum of vegetables, and eat more fiber and more protein. You'll be able to make those choices. You'll have the energy to do the food prep or just the interest in eating those foods. And then along with that comes improved mood, deeper and more joyful connections with others, just overall vitality, which is what we need to really take care of our health and move through this transition. So it's the single most important activity we could do is get our deep, solid sleep.
Yes. So I think, focus, sleep, and everything else, the rest of your world falls into place once you get good sleep. So coming back to our three takeaways for good sleep.
Yeah. So number one, use the tools and strategies that are available, whether it's the lifestyle changes, some of the modifications we can all make in our day. Some of the pieces that we talked about adding in. So maybe it's removing some things like the nighttime scrolling or the Netflix, the half hour before bed. So that's the restricting or moving, the alcohol, the caffeine, etc., the blue stimulating light. Number two would be what to add in. So maybe consider some supplementation or some other practices like meditation, stretching, adding in the exercise in the earlier part of the day, the daylight, getting into the daylight in the earlier part of the day, going for a walk. And then number three is just having that perspective that it is important and that you're important and that this has that domino effect. Like, I think just that knowledge of the domino effect is inspiring to see. When you see the benefits, you're just ready to make those changes.
Wow, that's impactful. That is really impactful. and each of these three things is packed with so many other things. So it's so hard to put them just 1, 2, 3, but each of the 1, 2, 3 have another 8, 10 things under them. So basically, it's great because now our listeners have maybe 30 things to work on, and start working on them slowly. It's not about doing it today or getting it right today, but perhaps working on each step a little every day. So thank you so much for sharing this. It's been amazing having this conversation with you. I've always loved having conversations with you, Heidi, and it's sleep is so critical, and I'm so happy that we've been able to do this and put this information out there. It's going to be super useful to all our listeners.
And I think we can do it because we are getting deep, solid sleeps.
That's so true. That is so true. Yeah, you don't sleep well, this podcast ain't happening. So, yeah.
Thank you, Supreet. This was great.
Thanks again for tuning in to MenopauseWize. Stay informed, stay empowered, and I'll see you in the next episode as we continue to navigate the menopause journey together. If you're a healthcare provider interested in collaborating with us or have insights to share, we'd love to hear from you. Please email us at info@menopausewize.com. That's wise with a Z. And before we go, a quick medical disclaimer. The information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your physician or a qualified healthcare provider before making any decisions regarding your health or any medical treatments discussed in this podcast. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, this podcast does not replace professional medical consultation, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have any concerns or symptoms that require medical attention, please seek advice from your healthcare provider.